educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast, where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here is your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
Thank you very much for tuning in today. I have, a different guest today. I don't know if I should call her a LinkedIn influencer or someone who can really help us grow professionally, personally, and understanding what it means to have a coach or a mentor. That's going to be our goal for today. But she was able to grow her audience from 1,000 to 29,000 individuals in just 10 months using content centered around personal development and growth while working her 9 to 5. So you can still achieve your goals while you're still working. She has been recognized as a top rising star and top 50 creator gems on LinkedIn. She was also featured in Times Square in October 2023 talking about mentorship. I thank y'all very much for tuning in today. I bring none other to you than Catherine. Catherine, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sure, no problem. So, first of all, as I introduce you, it said something about being a creator, or an influencer, or how, we kind of throw these terms around. So, one, idea-wise, how does that even feel? What does that even look like, being an influencer?
Well, that's a big word. I don't know if I would call myself an influencer, but creativity is super important for your brain. And I think creativity saved me. I mean, last year, I started writing last January, 2023.
Okay.
And I was on antidepressants. I had just moved to a new city. I didn't have any, a new city where I don't have any family. I had a few friends here, but not a group yet,
Okay.
And I had never created or anything like that online before. So tapping back into that, I grew up an artist. I played piano. I was in orchestra.
Nice.
And so tapping back into that really kind of changed my life, and it kind of saved me from downward spiral.
So with that, not just relying heavily on your past, or even like you said, just trying to influence someone else, but have you reached out to a mentor or a coach to actually help you navigate through that process?
So I took a class with Hala Taha. She is big boss, queen of LinkedIn. She's called the podcast princess as well. And she had a class for LinkedIn creating, and it was actually a full-blown media class.
Okay.
And personal branding and everything in between. And she really opened the door on kind of tips and tricks to use when creating content. And then she has a mastermind after the class that you can opt into.
Okay.
And she's provided a lot of guidance through that as well. So she was on the billboard with me. I highlighted her for sure because she is one of the biggest influences. And yeah, that's a big one.
So how important is it to have a mentor or a coach to help you through not just the tough times, but even throughout your career and or entrepreneurship?
I mean, it's priceless. I would highly recommend, if you are navigating something that you don't have a support system around already, or even if you do have a support system, a coach or someone to help you through that is invaluable, because they're going to give you a step-by-step of here's where the struggle happens. It's going to happen. You got to suck it up. Or, here's another struggle. Here's how you navigate out of it. And it makes it a lot easier to connect those dots and jump those stepping stones to success, for sure.
So, a lot of times we pay attention to our coaches and our mentors, and maybe we stick a little too close, and sometimes we're not sure of our own strength and or value. So how important is it for us to dig deeper into ourselves? Yes, we have a coach and mentor to help us navigate and maybe help us to think outside of the box sometimes, or think outside of ourselves. But how important is it to even listen to what's going on within us?
I would say that's the most important thing you can do for yourself is listen to your gut. Your coach or the expert is the guide, but you are the one who has to live with everything, every choice you make. So you're not going to want to make every choice that maybe your coach has made because that worked for them, but you're a unique person, you have unique circumstances, and you want to go your own path. There can only be one individual. You can't, copy and paste someone and
Right.
that'll work for a little bit, but authenticity is the only sustainable characteristic at the end of the day.
Sometimes it's hard to be authentic because of social media, because, I remember a time working in corporate America where my manager, he was really trying to make any one of us to duplicate him. So we can eventually maybe take his position or whatever it might be. And sometimes we get caught up in that because we feel as though maybe that's the only path we have. So
Right.
so how do we become authentic or trust in who we are genuinely? Because a lot of people wants us to be just like them.
Yeah, especially in a 9 to 5, I could see that being a struggle. I think what we lose in a 9 to 5 maybe is the concept of systems versus copy and paste. So if you have a system for something, you have, this is what happens when the client does this. And after the client, signs the contract, then you go to the next step, then you go to the next step. And that's a really good system to follow. What you probably don't want to follow is exactly something that someone laid out for you because it worked for them. So they can have a system that works for them and you can follow that system. But following, exactly the path that they've gone down using these systems doesn't always work because you detach from yourself, you lose that
Right.
authenticity, and you want to listen to that inner gut, and you want to take the skills that you're learning at a 9 to 5 and implement them in any promotion you get, or maybe you're looking for another job at a different 9 to 5, and what works for that 9 to 5 may not work at a different company. So
Right.
you want to take these skills and these systems, but you don't want to take, maybe every trait that you learn from manager. Makes sense.
So sometimes we have to use our instincts, survival instincts, whatever instincts we have, just to be able to get from one day to the next. A lot of times we don't take that idea in our jobs or even in entrepreneurship because, again, we're talking about being authentic, right? And we're, as you talked about, being that copy and paste, all those type of things. But we listen to some of these coaches and or mentors. They say, well, this is the greatest thing, and we can get you to, as in your bio, 1,000, 29,000, viewers, subscribers, whatever it is. But you are Catherine. Everyone is not Catherine, right?
Right.
So how do we keep that part? Because we're so consumed about what we see, especially on social media. You're doing great things on social media. You're a rising gem and rising star, things like that. So we get to see that. So how do we not want to copy and paste Catherine?
Like I said, authenticity is the only sustainable thing. It's the only sustainable characteristic you can really have. You if I'm doing something online and it's personal development, I am not the only person who writes about personal development by a long shot.
Right.
what people like, I think, about my specific posts are I'm like one step ahead of the post. So like I was just there. This is how it worked for me. And I think people like the voice in which I portray the message. You know, I talk a lot about language. Everybody speaks a different language. I read one of the best self-help books I have ever read was a super woo-woo book. It was super spiritual. And that just spoke to me more than any other like textbook could or anything like that. So you can have the same message, have different messaging.
So something that is very interesting that you say you stay one step ahead. So what does that mean by staying one step ahead?
Sure. I explain it as I have a wider range of attention on my posts, I think, because they're very general. I'm not the person who's made $10 billion and I'm like, here's what I do when I buy a yacht.
Right.
You know, not a lot of people can relate to that.
Right.
And I think a lot of people can relate to, okay, this person is, about to get married. So I haven't hit that marriage milestone yet. I have a corporate job. I work a 9 to 5 and have this side hustle. And I think that like I'm learning these things that I post about maybe like 6 months before I post them. And so I know how to write really well about them because I just like mastered them.
That's funny. So with your saying that you might have posted something that might have happened 6 months ago, even 3 months ago. A lot of times people want to post something today, and so I think something that what I'm gathering from you, if I'm not mistaken, that not only have you learned from that, but you may have been able to implement it in your day-to-day in whatever your next project is or whatever it is. So how important is it to take in what you've learned, digest it a little bit, and then put it back out to the people?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think one of the most important things in success, whether it's influencing your 9 to 5 entrepreneurship, is failure. And tried and true, I have tested and failed many of the things that I've posted about. And then with failure, you gather all the lessons that you get, and that's really where you're learning.
Catherine. So a lot of us don't want to deal with failure because we're really nervous about that because in failure comes mental health, and we're not encouraged, we're not motivated, all those type of things. And I think sometimes when we say the word failure, we don't understand that is actually a learning process for the next step, for the next venture, whatever it is. So can you elaborate a little bit more about how you might have dealt with your moments of failure and to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this as a podcaster. I'm sure your first episode didn't get, hundreds of thousands of views and it didn't, gain the traction. You're not on like CNN from your first ever post or podcast. In terms of content creation, same with me. It's terrifying to put yourself out there. It really is. And in any sense, whether it's like going for promotion or going for whatever. But my first piece of content that I put online compared to how they go today, compared to how they go viral today, was a failure. And I couldn't go from like 0 to 1,000 likes per post without having those little stepping stones along the way. So those little lessons, we'll call them, but compared to today, that post would be a failure in terms of engagement. I don't think really you can call any content failure if you're trying, but you just have to learn how to like relate to your audience or whatever.
So how important is it to know who my audience is? Maybe, because sometimes we think broad and think any one thing we're going to do is going to hit, So like for this show, as you stated, hey, I started That'll Never Work. I thought it was going to affect everybody. But over the next year or so, I started to be able to focus on who my actual who's digesting my content, being 25 to 55-year-olds, and whatnot. So how important is it to know who I'm speaking to at any given time?
I think it's important to know. I think the most important content you put out is if you have a muse.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, your muse would be the demographic who watches your show or listens to your show. And if you can think of a muse who you know personally, who you can like write that content to or deliver that content to, I think that you'll gain more audience or you'll have more ears to listen if your intention is delivering to one person. My muse is my little sister. She's in her 20s. She has the same struggles I did in my 20s. And I'm just out here like, listen, if you do these things, you can really like bust down all these limiting beliefs that you have in yourself.
So like you said, for your muse, you talking to your little sister. So in that, do you actually see yourself? So is that a way that you maybe are trying to coach the inner you, the kid in you, whatever it might be? Just use that as an example, right? Because a lot of times, again, we don't want to look at our past. We don't want to look at the failures. We don't look at the growing pains, whatever it might be. So how inspiring is that for you to talk to your younger self, quote unquote, for who you plan on being in 10 years?
I mean, it's a super hard thing to look in the mirror, like you said, to look at your past, look at your failures. So maybe it is like writing to my younger self. I hear it all the time. The best content is written to your younger self. And maybe I just say sisters, so I don't have to like, it wasn't me.
Right.
No, she definitely fails a lot less in her 20s than I did. So, but yeah, that's a really interesting point. Have you read the book by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me?
I have not.
It's really good.
Okay.
David Goggins is amazing. He talks about like making your brain hard, basically, and just like having all these tips and tricks on how to just go throughout your day. Like he had super bad depression. He was super overweight. Now he's like a graduated Navy SEAL and he's like a forest fighter now or something. He's like an amazing human. But he said that step number one is to be just deeply honest with yourself and self-improvement. He's like, when I was 300 pounds or whatever he was, I couldn't tell myself like, I'm going to get there tomorrow. I'm going to work out and I'm going to be, he's like, no, I just had to tell myself, you're fat. You got to work out. I'm like, man, that's brutal. But sometimes that's what you need. That's like the deepest form of self-love is truth.
So if you pay attention to what's going on in society, we don't handle the truth very well.
No.
we and especially for that space of being that direct. So I think that's something that we need to do in our development and personal growth. Just being honest with ourselves from day to day. Hey, maybe I don't need that chocolate cake today. As much as I would love it, and I'm from Philly, so of course I might not need that cheesesteak today. So those type of things that, we don't deal with truth and honesty very well, especially when we're trying to do it to ourselves.
Right. And it's really hard to deal with truth when there's so much comparison going on online. Like, for example, a lot of makeup brands do really well in every algorithm, which is weird to me. I don't know why that. I mean, maybe it shows up more on my algorithm because I'm a woman too, but Kim Kardashian, for example, I would never knock a Kardashian. The amount of fame they have takes strategy and hustle. So,
Yeah, it does.
but they have this big platform and they're pushing makeup. And I'm like, why? Is it because it does well? I don't get it. But there's so much comparison in everything that all the algorithm pushes out there. And so it's hard to say, I'm not that. But I think it's important to say, I'm not that yet. I think there's huge power in yet. So, and you don't have to be whatever you're comparing yourself to. But if it's something like weight loss, like David Goggins says, you can be honest with yourself without beating yourself up. And you don't have to compare yourself unless it's in a healthy way and you're saying that's my goal, not that's my competition.
Wow.
I kind of derailed there. I'm sorry. I went in 20 different directions.
Catherine, it was good. It was all good. It was cool. It was cool. But I thank you for coming on today. So let me ask you this question before I let you go. Where can people find you and talk to you? Maybe they're struggling with something, to read your post, maybe that will help them out, or contact you just to, hey, I'm looking for a coach to help me through this, Catherine. So where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Catherine Tede, and Instagram, Catherine Tede _.
Okay. That's cool. So thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
And before I let you go, I got, of course, my world famous question.
Ready for it.
My would you rather question. Would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
Choose 3 doors or a fork. So I can choose from 3 doors or choose which way direction.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so here's the thing. Just be, just to forewarn you, there are no parameters. All the parameters is based off of you.
Okay. Man. I would probably choose. It's a good one. The fork in the road, less decision. And the reason being is whether left or right, I'll figure it out.
Okay. Some people have chosen the fork because of the, I could see the footprints in the ground, the road less traveled. Maybe I could peek down the road. But I've also heard people say, hey, I went to 3 doors because I want to know if the doors are made of glass. Can I peek in like a few, things like that. So, but, I appreciate you, playing along with my would you rather question.
Absolutely.
Cool. Catherine, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to That Will Never Work podcast.
Thanks for listening. Find us on social media at Chisholm Group LLC and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work, or will it?